I do want to talk about Columbus Day from kind of a really big picture perspective, and starting the first five, just to say this is the 528th anniversary of Christopher Columbus and the 1492 discovery of the Americas. And you likely know many people on the left want to stop calling it Columbus Day, want to stop honoring Christopher Columbus, want to call it Indigenous Peoples Day or some other name like that. But I want to talk about really where the world was in 1492 and what happened in this continent, what happened in this Western Hemisphere because of the discovery of America in 1492 by Christopher Columbus. First of all, I would like to point out that in America today, where we are in the year 2020, we have, as you likely know, many left-wing organizations very, very much vilifying Christopher Columbus, talking about the idea that, as a matter of fact, when he came over to the Western world, he, of course, brought diseases, brought challenges to people. They ended up, his conduct was not consistent with the conduct of a modern day explorer. Of course, he was behavior consistent with the conduct of someone who lived in that era. He engaged in behavior that was repressive of people who were minorities, repressive of people who were indigenous people. So he didn't, he wasn't by modern day standards, this perfect model person. But he was a man willing to strike out and sail the world at a time when no one really knew the exact contours of the world. No one knew what it was. And he was willing to come out and do that. And just think, as he came to the Americas, came to the discovery we now know as North and South America, what has happened to those continents in the time since he made this fateful voyage? Here in America today, you have, of course, many people condemning him, because of the conduct of his life, which doesn't meet modern day standards. You have people tearing down Christopher Columbus statues. You have people saying we shouldn't even honor him anymore. They're ashamed that we ever made it a holiday. They want to call it some other name, Indigenous Peoples Holiday. You have people tearing down Christopher Columbus statues in cities all around this country. You had a city employee and you had a decapitated statue of Christopher Columbus in an Italian neighborhood in Boston. People didn't appreciate that too much. You had all over this country, you had the tearing down of Christopher Columbus statues and the tearing down of other anything honoring him for his sailing, his bravery, his coming here, because they look at the negative side of what he did or the behaviors that now are not consistent with modern day life. And so they want to kind of erase him. They talk about erasing people or censuring people, the political correctness that just kind of erases their very existence, the cancel culture. It is an effort to erase him from our modern memory, erase him from our honoring of what he did and what he set in place in this world by sailing off and coming to America. This is consistent with much that the left is doing in many other arenas, wanting to cancel, denigrate, destroy any replica that is celebrating anyone's life. That now, as we look at the world today in 2020, we look back at people and say, oh, but they believed in this, they did this, they engaged in this conduct, they didn't understand this, they shouldn't have done this, and essentially erase their existence. It's what the left is trying to do with statues that relate to or that are representing Civil War leaders from the American South. And during the Civil War, you have tearing down all the statues of people who in any way supported the South. You have tearing down the statues of all sorts of. The left has become so hysterical about just erasing America's history that they actually are attacking statues of people who did noble things in American history, tearing down Thomas Jefferson statues, desecrating George Washington statues and memorials, Abraham Lincoln. You have a mentality that has taken hold in the anti-American left in this country and frankly in this world. You have a mentality that says, number one, they decide who's worthy of being honored. They decide, not the American people, not the historians, the radical anti-American, hate America left, they decide who can be honored and whose memory is to be denigrated and destroyed, whose statues are to be torn down or defaced with graffiti. So you have in this movement, in this grand scheme of America, you think starting in, if you want to pick the starting point of 1492 of the beginning of the development of the Western Hemisphere world, you have this in 2020, this mindset that says that they are going to be the ones that define who is worthy of praise, who is worthy of ridicule, who is to be erased from our history, who is to be punished and destroyed, who is to be, whether it's Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, great heroes of America's history, and even before America existed, great heroes in world history whose explorations brought us to where we are today, to having an America in 2020. I want to wrap up the first 5 by saying this. I am not a particular rah-rah historical student all in favor of forever propping up Christopher Columbus. But I do want to inspire Americans in this extraordinarily important election year to get the deepest grasp we can on the extraordinary, unique greatness of the country we now call the United States of America, to recognize where that greatness came from, why America is extraordinarily great and unique, why it emerged in all of human history with all of these famous countries dating back from the BC era, and famous civilizations rising and falling, and powers controlling, taking over each other, and countries changing, and armies invading other countries. So the world map of what countries existed, who is in charge, what empires ruled where, all of this big scope of human history defined countries throughout all of history. And here in America today, as we're taking a little bit of a break from our normal political analysis, there is just a profoundly important thing to recognize. What happened in the Western Hemisphere, springing off of Christopher Columbus's coming to America, discovering America, coming to America, and how much all of the greatness that has been developed in the Western world, the true development of Western civilization that we are the epitome of here in America, all of it is on the chopping block in this election cycle because of the agenda of the anti-American radical left in this country. All of the greatness that came from America's history, all of it is on the chopping block in this 2020 election cycle, because you don't just have, there is no such thing as a sane, moderate Democrat Party. You have the radical, Marxist, anti-American left gaining power inconceivable just decades ago. And every agenda item they have is tearing down the greatness and unique, extraordinary greatness of America. It is incumbent on Americans in this election cycle to recognize how much of America is up for grabs in the 2020 election cycle, how much of America could be destroyed if we don't get this election right. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First 5.